Good evening, everybody. Our top story is a powerful 7-magnitude earthquake hitting Alaska this afternoon, the epicenter, just miles from the capital city of Anchorage. The quake shook buildings and bridges, tore up roads and streets, and residents sent scrambling for safety. And aftershocks are still rattling through the region.
Quick, make no mistake, this was a big one. The damage right now is quite significant. If you're seeing it on the news, you're seeing pictures. And where it's very significant is with regard to our infrastructure, with regard to bridges, with regard to highways that have collapsed.
We'll have the latest breaking developments on this powerful and devastating quake, its aftermath, and the continuing aftershocks throughout this broadcast. Also, while President Trump is doing deals and diplomacy, putting America first at the G20 summit in Argentina, the Mueller witch hunt slithers on, producing no evidence of any kind of collusion in more than 2 years of investigation by the FBI and the special counsel. The angry Dems who make up the special counsel are increasingly desperate and pathetically trying to smear this president and those close to him with their politically motivated leaks and campaigns of innuendo. And of course, the partisan establishment and globalist elites of both parties cheering Mueller on and on and on. We examined Mueller's partisan persecution of President Trump, Mueller's consistent leaking of allegations, and the special counsel's efforts to undermine this president whenever Mr. Trump is within days of an important summit. Coincidence? Not on your life. One of the best-known conservative journalists in the country has found himself in Mueller's crosshairs, but he is fighting back. Author and commentator Jerome Corsi joins me here tonight. And in Brazil, an historic election of a new president. He's sometimes called the Trump of Brazil. And after years of economic decline and stagnation in the second largest country in the hemisphere, rampant political corruption, more than 200 million Brazilians are now to be led by the populist Jair Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro won on a platform of putting his country first, by strengthening the military, by cutting taxes, embracing conservative values. Brazilian Congressman Eduardo Bolsonaro, the president-elect's son, joins us tonight. Our top story, a powerful earthquake shocking Alaska. The quake's epicenter just miles from Anchorage. The earthquake, a magnitude 7.0, and it has had a number of several strong aftershocks, ripping up roads, tearing down buildings, shattering glass in homes and businesses throughout the region. Correspondent Dan Springer with the latest now from our Northwest Bureau in Seattle. Dan?
Hi, Lou. They are still assessing the damage in and around Anchorage, but this much is clear. It is major and will cause problems getting around Anchorage for many months. The earthquake was centered in Point McKenzie. That's just about 5 miles north of downtown Anchorage, home to about 280,000 Alaskans. The ground shook for over a minute, causing severe damage to roads, bridges, breaking water mains, and knocking out power to tens of thousands. It triggered a tsunami warning, which was later canceled. Also, the 800-mile oil pipeline, the money-making lifeblood of the state, has been shut down as a precaution. There are no reports of damage to that pipeline. The airport was also shut down for a while, but planes are again being allowed to take off and land. The regional head of FEMA is on his way to Anchorage, and the state's congressional delegation held a news conference this afternoon.
The infrastructure assessment will be a longer-term assessment, most clearly, but it has impacted the major arterials in and around Anchorage, and that is a concern.
The video is dramatic. This was on the 6th floor of the courthouse in downtown Anchorage. You can see things banging against the walls and people ducking for cover. There are reports of widespread damage, primarily to the many houses in the area. Wasilla's own Sarah Palin, the former governor of Alaska and vice presidential nominee, put out on social media that her family is intact, but her house is not. Alaska is the most seismically active state in the country with 10,000 earthquakes a year, and 45 of those earthquakes range in strength between magnitude 6 and 7, but it is rare to see a quake this strong in Anchorage. The great news is there are no reports of any deaths or even significant injuries, but there was plenty of drama. We got a picture taken by a guy who was driving this truck. When the earthquake started, it was dark outside. He stopped the truck. When he got out, the road had collapsed around him. Thankfully, he's okay, but like so many Alaskans today, nerves are shaken and still too early to tell exactly the extent of the damage. Lou?
Dan, thank you very much. Dan Springer reporting. President Trump pushing forward with the America First agenda at the G20 in Argentina. But once again, special counsel Robert Mueller's witch hunt has taken steps to distract the president while he's abroad. Yesterday, as the president prepared to depart for the important summit, Mueller announced a plea deal had been reached with former Trump attorney Michael Cohen. The move eerily similar to the very same stunt that Mueller pulled just before the president headed to his July summit in Helsinki with Russian President Vladimir Putin. 3 days before the meeting between the president and Putin, Mueller indicted 12 Russian military officials for hacking the Democratic Party's computer system to sabotage the 2016 election. But nothing has come from that, of course. It was purely a show demonstration. Earlier today, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders decried Mueller and the negative impact that his investigation has had on American foreign relations, saying this: the Russian witch hunt hoax, which is hopefully now nearing an end, is doing very well, unfortunately. It probably does undermine our relationship with Russia. My next guest says he intends to shut down Special Counsel Mueller's witch hunt. He's rejected a plea deal from Mueller, and he is now fighting accusations that he lied under oath. He's filing a criminal complaint against Mueller and the Justice Department for prosecutorial misconduct. Joining us here tonight, political commentator, New York Times bestselling author Jerome Corsi, the author of the soon-to-be-released Silent No More: How I Became a Political Prisoner of Mueller's Witch Hunt. It will be available next week, first as an ebook on Amazon. Great to have you here.
Lou, great to be back with you. Thank you.
This is an extraordinary tale. You were told, in effect, by the Mueller counsel to plead to a deal that would keep you from being prosecuted for lying to Robert Mueller's witch hunt attorneys.
Right. I mean, first of all, I came into, this was after 40 hours of testimony over 6 sessions in 2 months. My attorney and I began it by wanting to work voluntarily with the Mueller special counsel. I brought in my computers, my time machine, signed off over
you turned over documents,
all my email accounts, everything.
40 hours, 40 hours of testimony
over 2 months.
So what did you lie about?
Well, this is a remarkable thing. The first day, I had forgotten a couple of emails, and I said I did not want to send anyone to see Julian Assange.
Right.
And there's this one email which I had not seen. I did not get to reload my 2016 emails on a broken computer till after the first day. And this one email from Roger Stone said, get to Assange, and I forwarded it to Ted Malloch, professor in London. Now, I'd forgotten about that. And in fact, special prosecutor let me...
What was it that you were telling him to get to Assange?
Oh, just to... the message was someone should go and see Assange in London in order to find out what additional emails after July 22nd, when Assange dropped emails on W. Wasserman Schultz, he had more, and Roger Stone wanted to find out what they are.
That seems like a century ago, doesn't it?
It does, and it's a normal request. I mean, every journalist in America wanted to know what Assange had, and I forwarded it to Ted Malloch, and I'd forgotten about it.
Did you ever get a reply?
Well, no, in fact, I didn't. I do not think Ted ever went. He never replied to the email.
And you never talked with Assange or communicated directly with him?
Absolutely not. I don't know Assange. I've never met Assange. And the special prosecutor let me amend this testimony. And after I saw the email, I said I was wrong. But I'm being charged. They wanted me to plead guilty to a charge which was on the original day one mistake, not the amended testimony.
They allowed you to amend it and then had the effrontery, the arrogance, the impertinence to the gall to charge you with lying when they acknowledged that they would allow you to amend it, did so, and you amended it.
Yes. And this
Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. I can't believe it either. It's not justice as I understand it in America.
It's not justice anywhere in the world.
Right.
This is. I mean, it's.
And so, look, I would not go in front of a federal judge and swear to God, and that means something to me. I mean, I'm a weird duck coming from Harvard. I do believe in Jesus Christ, and I do believe in God.
There are a few of us left.
There's a few of us left. And I'm not going to go before a federal judge and put my hand up and swear that I knowingly and willingly used false information with an intent to deceive the government when I know I didn't.
So where do you stand with the special counsel?
Well, I expect that they could come. They may come to knock on my door tonight and arrest me, because having rejected their plea deal, which they offered.
How did you reject it? What form did that take?
Oh, I went on this. In fact, Monday, I was on One American News, and I said I reject the deal. I'd had it. I reject the deal. I'm not going to do it. That's when I announced it.
That's a very Trumpian thing you just did. You're communicating by television. Did you also tweet it?
No, I don't think I tweeted it until the next day.
So has there been, just in the interest of clarity,
right.
Has there been any follow-up so that you are directly telling your attorney to talk to the attorneys?
Yes. Well, my attorney and I have discussed this at great length, and he's formally...
No, I'm not talking about with your attorney. Has he or you directly talked to the special counsel?
My attorney has, and my attorney's told, we'll take it from here. Hang up the phone.
Well, outrageous. Persist. I know you will. I can't imagine any judge in this country, no matter what, in this politically corrupted judiciary of ours, would fail to understand the wrong, the wrong that this special counsel is trying to do to you.
Well, if I have to die in jail over this to get the point across to the American people that this is not the standard of justice in America I grew up with, I'll die in jail. I will not swear before a judge to a lie.
You know, I think, to paraphrase Patton, it's the other SOBs who should perhaps make sacrifices. It's great to see you here. I wish you all the luck.
Thank you, Lou. I really appreciate it.
And let's hope this nightmare, this witch hunt, and the arrogance of these, what is it the president calls them, 17 angry Democrats trailing along Robert Mueller, a disaster for the country.
God bless you, Lou. Thank you very much.
You too. Thank you very much, Jerry. Jerome Corsi. And again, his ebook is coming out next week. The book title is Silent No More, How I Became a Political Prisoner of Mueller's Witch Hunt. Now, it's coming out next week as an ebook on Amazon. You can go to Amazon and pre-order it now. We encourage you to do so. We recommend it to you highly. It is quite a story. It is a tragic situation. What the president has to endure, what Jerome Corsi has to endure, what the nation has to endure because of the partisan witch hunt that has been going on, first under the FBI for almost a year, and now for a year and a half under a special counsel that is produced, as Richard Burr, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence chairman, said, not a scintilla of evidence. Up next here, more developments in the Mueller witch hunt. We'll take up the latest in the special counsel case against the president's former campaign manager. Also fired FBI Director James Comey challenging a subpoena to appear before the House. What is he hiding? And why does he think he can win in court against the Congress of the United States? And why would a man who has devoted so much of his life to public service suddenly be afraid of our system of government? We take it up after the break with Trump 2020 Advisory Board member Mark Lauder. He joins us here next. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
He's got the expertise. He's getting answers from the movers and shakers impacting the world and your money.
Considering new charges tonight against former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort. But none of those charges have anything to do with Russian collusion. But we're getting used to that, aren't we? For the latest on the Mueller witch hunt, we turn to Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge.
Paul Manafort's legal team arrived at the federal court in Washington for the short hearing where special counsel prosecutor Andrew Weissman indicated more criminal charges are under consideration, including offenses Manafort admitted to but was never charged with. Manafort's lawyers say the special counsel is using pressure tactics, and the plea deal broke down because Mueller's team wants information their client cannot provide. A tentative sentencing is now scheduled for March.
Mr. Cohen has cooperated.
A day after the president's former personal attorney pled guilty to lying to Congress, Donald Trump Jr.'s 2017 Senate testimony about the Moscow real estate proposal is under scrutiny. While Michael Cohen claimed he briefed the Trump family, the president's son said he knew, quote, very little about the deal, adding, it sort of faded away, I believe, at the end of 2014. That timeline appears to conflict with Cohen, who said discussions continued until June 2016. Separately, Felix Sater, a Russian-born real estate developer, broached the idea of a penthouse for Russian President Vladimir Putin. Sater did not comment to Fox on the penthouse proposal, but said, quote, no matter which capital you built this caliber of a project in, you would need cooperation of local government. A former Justice Department official is reserving judgment.
The big question is whether it crosses the line to establish some sort of criminal wrongdoing on the part of the president or those close to him. I think that is the big question. Politically damaging, yes. What are the legal consequences? I would say to be determined.
Pointing to a double standard, Fox News has learned the president's legal team is revisiting their 2017 request to Mueller and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein to investigate former FBI Director James Comey over the accuracy of his sworn congressional testimony. Comey's lawyers were also in court today battling a congressional subpoena for a closed-door interview under oath. The committee chairman accused the former director of using the same legal tactics as the firm behind the anti-Trump dossier.
He is trying to run the clock on us, and that's why we think he's filed this motion to quash. Fusion GPS also tried that. They were knocked down, and instead he came in, Glenn Simpson came in and took the fifth.
Late today, the judge said he may rule on the Comey subpoena as early as Monday. Comey wants a public hearing because he accuses some committee members of selective leaks, even though 16 other committee witnesses agreed to a closed-door interview, including former senior FBI leadership. Lou.
Catherine, thank you very much. Comey obviously is what he is. Adding to that report, a federal appellate court has announced it will hold a closed oral argument session on December 14th to address a lawsuit apparently filed, definitely filed against special counsel Robert Mueller, but apparently by an unidentified grand jury witness not particularly thrilled with the special counsel. There seems to be a theme building here, doesn't there? Joining me now to take up the latest from the Mueller witch hunt, the signing of the new trade agreement among the United States, Canada, and Mexico, former press secretary to Vice President Pence, Trump 2020 Advisory Board member Mark Lauder. Mark, good to have you with us here.
Thanks for having me, Lou.
Let's start with the special counsel and what is now it is moving toward a drumbeat of those willing to stand up against Mueller and say, this is enough. You're not going to trample on my civil rights. You're not going to intimidate me. You're going to treat me with respect as an American citizen. Where do you think we're headed here?
I think it's been clear for quite some time that this is not an investigation of a crime looking for a suspect. It's an investigation of a man looking for a crime, that man being President Donald Trump. And the special counsel and his prosecutors are turning more screws right now than the rehab experts on HGTV. They are trying to find anyone and everyone they can intimidate and pressure into saying what they want to hear. If you say it, you'll get a lighter sentence. If you don't, you're going to prison for a very long time. And I think your earlier guest is testament to that.
Yeah, Jerome Corsi, charged with lying by the FBI, wanting a plea deal, not charged, demanding a plea deal to agree to becoming a federal felon for something that he was allowed to amend. It's reaching a new level. I think, of intimidation and utter trampling of citizen rights.
No, you're absolutely right, and it just shows they are so consumed with finding something. They've been at this for a year and a half with no evidence of collusion, so they're trying to now justify their existence by going back and finding past transgressions from business dealings, in some cases decades or a decade or more behind us, well before the campaign started, and trying to use that as pressure, and it's just not panning out for them.
Why do you think the Republican leadership, and I'm talking about specifically McConnell and Ryan, have refused to stand up for this president and say to the general counsel, here's a date certain, get it wrapped up and move on, because it is now a travesty against justice instead of a special counsel in the interest of justice?
Well, I think at a certain level, they're hoping what we all can see plainly is that at the end of the day, you're going to have a report that shows that there was no collusion between the Trump campaign, the president, and Russia. And so if they allow this to play itself out, there will be that vindication. If you shut it down, it becomes more of a political issue where you'll have questions and Democrats who are continuing to say, well, we never know, we'll never know. So hopefully, Director Mueller is working through this process, and he's going to come to the conclusion that we can all see clearly in front of our eyes and what the president has said from day one. There was no collusion.
Mark, let's turn to the president bringing together the other two leaders in the multilateral deal, the USMCA, the trade agreement among Canada, Mexico, and the United States, a campaign promise, a promise that he made. Now coming to fruition. It has to go before Congress, of course, to be approved. Breaking news now, President Trump will not be meeting with Russian President Putin during the upcoming G20 summit in Argentina. President Trump tweeted out his decision earlier today, citing growing tension between Russia and Ukraine. Russia hasn't yet released the Ukrainian vessels and sailors that it seized last week in the Black Sea. President Trump slamming the Mueller witch hunt again this morning in a series of tweets, calling the probe illegal, ridiculous, and a disgrace, all of which are true. We'd like to add it is simply pathetic. In addition to working out a plea deal with former Trump attorney Michael Cohen, who has zero information about the president's alleged Russia collusion because there is none, Mueller now focusing on late-night phone calls between Donald Trump and Roger Stone. That's what he has been reduced to in this. Mueller is trying to squeeze author Jerome Corsi, a journalist and conservative, who said he will be filing a criminal lawsuit against Mueller. Mueller is absolutely, his tactics have blown up in his face since Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort reached a plea deal, and we'll see how that works out. Joining me now to take up the president's upcoming G20 summit, the impact it could have on the United States, China, and Russia relations, Tammy Bruce, Washington Times columnist, Fox Business contributor. Great to have you with us. I've got to start with Ryan. Can you imagine this? I mean, the words fail me. He is such an ignoramus that it's unspeakable what the speaker is.
It's remarkable. And I think he's serious when he expresses a kind of a genuine shock at why they would have lost the midterms and not knowing why that would happen. I do think, though, that he's not necessarily a dumb man. I think he knows.
Oh, I think he is. I think you're very safe to go there.
A lot of Republicans wanted this kind of a punch at the president. I don't think that they necessarily mind losing the House, because now they
Republicans?
I think they don't mind the Democrats being in charge and leading the charge.
Who's they?
The Republicans in the House.
You mean
the leadership?
Oh, the leadership.
Oh, yes. Well, certainly not all of them. The Freedom Caucus, but not. But I think.
Well, they're complete idiots then, and they should lose. They should be then disbanded.
Well, they're the managers of the monster. I think this argument that there's partisanship in Washington is a fraud. I think that's theater for the hoi polloi in the country, and that this is really about pulling the wool over our eyes and getting the monster to be as plump as it can be and managing it while pretending to really be conservative or liberal. That's what I think the Republicans have been doing for quite some time.
the Republican Party, the establishment wing of that party, the vast number of Republicans. I think you're right. There is a little problem, though. You've got a guy by the name of Donald Trump, who's president of the United States. He ran against the establishment. In point of fact, he's running against every one of those idiots in the Republican parties who are really Democrats posing as Republicans. I think you're right in that construction. But this president is right now. He is harvesting, these seeds of anti-establishmentarianism that he has been planting throughout the country for several years now. This is a real war. It's a fight that I hope the president doesn't ever get tired of waging, because so much depends on his strength, his leadership, and the weakness of these fools. Like, I mean, there's no other expression for what a Paul Ryan is.
There is a sentiment, I think, that...
And Kevin McCarthy, by the way, is coming in right behind him.
Oh, yeah.
He's the same bunch.
The president would be making a mistake, and I'm sure that people are telling him that the fight would be over after the midterms. Everyone will settle down. It will not, because the fight for the establishment...
No,
I'm sure
Speaker
some
Ryan
advisors
told
are.
him that.
Well, and other advisors within the establishment probably are telling him that, when in fact they know, as you are correct, this is a long-term fight. This is not just about this term or this presidency. This is about whether or not the Donald Trump attitude, the new GOP, would survive. And it's a GOP that would be led by a man of action, Donald Trump, with ideas that would help the American people, where management of the monster is no longer acceptable, that we've got to cut it down and really have government work for the people.
Do you think the American people have got the stomach for it?
Oh, yes. We're the American people who defeated the British when everyone said we couldn't. Look at what we've accomplished from the beginning.
But that wasn't last week. That wasn't last week.
We are even more, I think, being revolutionary is in our DNA. We're even more committed to making sure that this experiment works, because we are a relatively young country. Our generations will make it work. It's not going to fail on our watch. I can tell you that right now.
Okay. And I'm going to say, I hope the heck you're right. Tammy Bruce, always good to have you.
Thank you, Lou.
Thanks so much.
Great.
After calling for a free Palestine at the United Nations, the destruction of Israel, CNN finally cut ties with Mark Lamont Hill. While his comments were polarizing for CNN, it's apparently just remarkable that his other employer might keep him on the job. You see, Hill also is a professor at Temple University, and they say, quote, his views are his own, no problem for them, that he is anti-Israel and calling for the destruction of the country. Incredible. Up next, critical health concerns now involving more than a third of the 6,000 migrants crammed in a Tijuana, Mexico sports complex. We take it up with Trump 2020 Advisory Board member Steve Rogers right after this quick break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. On Wall Street, stocks closing lower slightly, barely. The Dow down 28 points. The S&P lost 6. The Nasdaq down 19. Not bad, since the Nasdaq yesterday was up 200. The Dow up more than 600. Volume on the big board backing down to 3.5 billion shares from 3.9 yesterday. Crude oil up nearly 2%, $51 a barrel. Gold closed flat. Silver down nearly 0.5%. Copper lost nearly 1%. And a reminder, listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast on the Salem Radio Network. Disturbing news tonight out of Tijuana. 6,000 migrants crammed into a sports complex there. More than a third of them are being treated for health-related issues. More than 2,200 medically treated. More than 60% with respiratory infections. And 101 cases of lice, 4 cases of chickenpox. Serious concerns about the prospect of hepatitis because of the unsanitary conditions in which they're living. Other concerns also being outlined by the Department of Homeland Security. They've identified now more than 600 criminals and gang members that are traveling in that caravan. Joining me tonight to talk about the growing crisis on our border, security concerns, and the president's fight to build a wall, of course, Steve Rogers, a Trump 2020 Advisory Board member, former Navy Lieutenant Commander, and a former FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force member. Steve, great to have you.
Pleasure to be here.
Let's start with that caravan. The president doing the right thing, securing the border. He's being attacked, as he is always, no matter what he does, by the establishment, by the left, by the right, by the Wall Street Business Roundtable, Chamber of Commerce, and then, of course, Chuck Schumer and all of his buddies.
Lou, after 9/11, as a military intel officer, I was assigned the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. And we were watching, we were gathering intelligence and information about that border. And we had concerns back then, way back then. Who's crossing the border? Of course, our concern was somebody would bring a dirty bomb across that border. But we knew there was a drug cartel. We knew there was human trafficking. Nothing was done until Donald Trump became president of the United States.
By the way, he's the first president and first presidential candidate to speak openly about the drug cartels and their role in corruption, not only in Mexico, but at the border. By the way, the American people are coming to the realization that corruption south of the border means there's corruption to the north of the border. And we're not doing nearly enough to fight that.
And he's delivering on his promise that he would protect the American people. When you hear about 600 gang members this week, a gang member from MS-13 was arrested. I mean, my goodness, how many did we not catch? So when he talks about protection, he meant it, and he's delivering.
Yeah, and by the way, MS-13 gang members are throughout the country, for crying out loud. This is the first president to actually do something about it. His Justice Department making headway, one of its few public, at least, accomplishments to this point. The Cohen guilty plea, your reaction to what the left-wing media is making of it. Here's a business deal that was never done, and now the great... I mean, you listen. I don't know if you saw the clips that we had of the left-wing media just going nuts.
Yeah.
There's no deal.
Lou, when I was doing investigations and police work and had a witness, a so-called witness, change his story a dozen times, how do you believe him? Where do you believe him? Look, Michael Cohen's out to save his own hide. And if he thinks he's going to save his hide on the back of the president of the United States, well, he's got another story coming his way.
The president's saying that he's going to play tough with Democrats if they continue to frustrate him and attack him. That he's going to release some documents that they will find very disturbing, the documents about them. What do you make of the promise, the threat, however you would style it?
Oh, I believe that he knows what's in those documents. Timing is everything. I know he cares for this country, and I know that perhaps he doesn't want to do damage to the country, even though it's the Democrats. He cares about our country. But if he has to use those documents to defend himself, go ahead. You know what, Lou? The American people, despite what the polls say, I'm out there, they support this president. They value his judgment.
You know, I'm troubled by a number of reports that are coming out. One is that there would be a framework of a deal that he might reach with, and this may be driven by Chinese propaganda in this country, that he might come up with a framework that would be satisfactory for a while and defer tariffs rather than continue with the tariffs and stay tough with them. And by the way, if that were the case, there would still be the matter of $500 billion in stolen American intellectual property each and every year. These are disturbing reports, and they're being driven in some measure by, I'll call them what they really are. They're never-Trumpers and establishment rhino Republicans within his own administration.
Well, let's look at that. Let's look at what the president has done already. He has never compromised on the security of this country. Never. And I believe that he's going to be driven by that, even with this issue in China.
Well, I think you're exactly right. And I have to wonder, though, when we look at this Mary Kissel appointment, a never-Trumper. I read to the audience a number of the tweets, her absolute pro-China, pro-fanatical, actually, free trade beliefs, and her attacks on the president. What in the world is Mike Pompeo thinking of, and why? How could you even rationalize this?
Well, difficult for us to rationalize it, but I got to tell you, I trust the judgment of the president, and I'm sure he is going to make sure she or anyone else supports his policies. He's the boss, not Mike Pompeo, no one else. He's the president of the United States.
Yeah, I think that may be a news break for Mike Pompeo based on his most recent hire.
Well,
thanks so much,
right.
Steve. Great to have you here, Steve Rogers. A new report from the Center for Disease Control shows life expectancy in this country has declined for the second time in the past 3 years. The average life expectancy last year fell to just over 78.5 years old. The CDC says an increase in drug overdoses and suicides in this country are to blame for this alarming trend. Last year, nearly 70,000 people died from drug overdoses, a 10% increase from the previous year. Last year, more than 47,000 suicides, up from the 45,000 the previous year. Overall, nearly 3 million people in this country died last year. That's 70,000 more deaths than in the previous year. Up next, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg telling Congress his company doesn't sell your data. That doesn't mean they don't try, or that they really don't. Really, what does it all mean? We take it up after the break with cybersecurity expert Morgan Wright. He joins us here next. Stay with us. Internal emails show Facebook considered profiting by selling companies access to your personal data. The emails reviewed by the Wall Street Journal also suggest Facebook employees talked about pushing some advertisers to spend more in return for increased access to user data. Joining me now to take up what is going on in Silicon Valley and big tech, to take up Facebook and the company's growing struggles and the increased cyber threats from Russia, from China, and Iran. Former senior advisor in the State Department's anti-terrorism assistance program, former law enforcement advisor to the RNC and cybersecurity expert, Morgan Wright. Morgan, great to see you. I want to compliment you on your recent op-ed in The Hill, in which you said point blank that high-tech's globalism is killing patriotism in this country. This is, right now, it seems to me the prospects for regulating out of control technology companies with huge economic concentration and power, this time may be right. What are your thoughts?
That's why Sarbanes-Oxley came about, Lou, and you know those things that led up to that, Adelphia, Tyco, Enron. Pretty soon the government said, hey, we're not going to take this anymore, and so you go through litigation, you sue, you go through regulation, like with the SEC and the FCC and the FTC, and then pretty soon it's like, okay, Congress goes, we've had enough of this, we're going to pass the law, and now it's going to be, codified, and your guys are going to, and people went to jail, Lou, people went to jail with Sarbanes-Oxley. So, what we're going to find out is that I think this issue of privacy is the watershed moment where we start looking at what's happening in the EU with the 7 countries that have filed against Google for tracking them, the issue of privacy, Facebook, Cambridge Analytica. This all has to come to a head sometime, and I think 2019 is going to be the year for it.
It's a hell of a note when the Europeans have more impressive laws protecting consumers, protecting our personal data than does the United States. It's incredible to me that we have lagged this far and given high tech such a pass. I want to just turn to a specific issue, and that is Google. Pichai is going to be talking before the
finally
we'll be talking to Congress. Meanwhile, he's doing business with China. It's an extraordinary mess. There's just no constraint, and apparently no effort to rein in Google and its absolutely pro-Chinese policies, which are effectively, the result is anti-American.
Look, and that's why one of the reasons I wrote the op-ed. And look, my father was a World War II vet. He was also a Vietnam vet. I mean, there were people that we lost a lot of people in defense of freedom to fight people like what China has become. And what has happened is we lack this patriotism now. It's okay to have America first. We can still have a view of the world. But in that op-ed that I wrote, in the research that I did, I found out that 47% of these CEOs believe in globalism. They believe the world should profit first before and be taken care of before the United States. But yet they built their businesses on the opportunities that came from the United States.
That's right.
And I think Google's opening up the AI, the Artificial Intelligence Center in Shanghai, and they go, it's going to be a vibrant place. Well, guess what? In China, nothing gets built there that doesn't get shared with the military. Yet they turned our military down and threw them to the curb on Project Maven on using artificial intelligence so we could save soldiers' lives and save other civilians' lives so they don't become collateral damage. And yet, where's the outrage on that? They were more concerned about Project Maven than they are the censored search engine that Google is defending still to this day. They say they're not building it, but they haven't thrown it to the curb yet either.
Yeah, and meanwhile, we're watching Chinese companies continue their advances here. The front companies that are carrying out espionage, 20% of places reserved for foreign students in our universities. you can mark it any way you want. It is a zero-sum game. That means 20% of those seats didn't go to an American student. Right. And there is no discussion whatsoever, no public policy about what has occurred by most of these universities that are left-wing driven. They are left-wing indoctrination centers. And we're looking at statistics now and surveys showing the millennial generation is the product of that indoctrination process in our public schools and our higher education.
Yeah, during a congressional hearing, FBI Director Wray talked about the Confucius Institutes, to what China's putting all this money. He talked about that this is simply a front for the Chinese government to commit espionage, to commit the theft of intellectual property. 60% of the foreign students in the United States now are Chinese. We have them in some of the most sensitive programs, getting PhDs in things around material science and artificial intelligence. And guess what? All of that's going back to China, along with the forced transfer of technology. If you want to do business in China, you got to play by their rules. Hey, if they want to do that, that's fine. I think we ought to do the same thing to Huawei and ZTE and all the other Chinese companies who want to sell stuff in the United States.
And this president relented with President Xi.
Unfortunately, on Huawei, he did, absolutely.
And that's got to be reversed, too, because what is happening is it's just unthinkable that we're letting this happen to this great country. And this president is responsible for driving these policies that will preserve the republic, one hopes. Morgan Wright, always good to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.
And I think it should be very clear to all why it is that the establishment is represented by the leadership of the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, why Wall Street, the Koch brothers are having a fit as this president's policies move us forward. They can't stand it because they know they're going to have to give up their globalist interest in favor of America first. Well, Morgan Wright, always good to have you here. Broward County residents will be footing the bill for Brenda Snipes' election antics, even after she leaves office. You know, I call them antics. Some would call it fraud. Starting in January, Snipes will receive a total of $130,000 a year in pensions. Residents of Florida will be paying for her incompetence for years and years to come. For a job well done, of course. Up next, well, you know what? I'm going to surprise you on the side. We'll be right back. Stay with us.